Good morning. I want to continue on with a discussion, if you like, about a Qigong mind moving into what is awareness and the relationship, in a sense, between awareness, Qigong mind, Qigong as a practice, and everyday life, I guess, would be really where it makes sense to tie all those things together. The last discussions I had were about the Qigong mind itself, what it is, what it isn't, the state of awareness and how, not necessarily how to get to that, but the benefits of that and what it means in terms of Qigong and how to get to being in a state of Qigong, a Qigong mind. Interestingly, my observations through practicing Qigong over the years have been that very thing, that there's been a lot of discussions in the New Age field and by various teachers about being in a state of awareness and the benefits of it. And interestingly, a lot of how-tos, I guess, too. And what I discussed last time about the Qigong mind was that when you are doing an activity, when you're doing an activity that involves you being present and therefore mindful, you have no choice but to be aware. And so training someone to be aware might be more difficult. Training someone to be mindful in many ways could be more difficult and may seem something that's unattainable. Whereas if we can involve ourselves in doing something in the present that needs our attention, naturally then that state of attentiveness brings awareness. For example, if you're hitting a nail in and you're holding the nail with your hand and you're hitting it with a hammer, it doesn't serve you very well not to be paying attention because the results can be painful, right? So that involves you being aware, being awake, being present, and so many daily activities involve that, don't they? If you're cooking, if you're doing any craft, you're painting, you can't just wander off and throw the brush across the canvas. Well, some people might, but it may not be the effect you want. Or it might be the effect you want. Well, that's up to you, right? So awareness really is something that naturally happens when we're doing activity. But what we're wanting to do is create a sense of the benefit of that in everyday life too, I think, is what we're aiming to do with practices like Qigong or meditation. And meditation, in many ways, is also a very misconstrued idea because there are many forms of meditation. You know, if you look through yoga and other Indian practices as well as so many New Age practices, right? There's infinite varieties of meditation. And ultimately, I question all of them to some degree, right? It doesn't mean I refute them or say they're nonsense, but I question their efficacy, in other words, how efficient they are or what their aim is. I would think that meditation really, from a Qigong point of view, meditation more implies this state of nothingness, being able to get into a state of emptiness, where the active brain and all its memory and all of its solutions and its cleverness and its education, right, and all its knowledge that it's gained over time, actually through formal education or you know, through the brain pondering all of these things and coming up with conclusions. The aim is to possibly have all of that come to some stillness, some cessation that we would want a state of emptiness. In Qigong, definitely, as Dr. Shu in Beijing talked about, who's the master or the founder or the teacher behind Qigong Qigong, nothingness is the best medicine, right? It seems such a strange statement, but it's the primary practice he uses in the medical hospital for bringing wellness to his students. He has them do the 5 element forms, the 5 exercises, and the 6th being global regulation in Qigong. And for example, in the Qigong hospital, he does other activities in there, but he was, I haven't talked to him in a while, but he was assigning 2 hours to practice in the afternoon from 3 till 5. Now in those 2 hours, you would only have a half an hour form of doing the physical exercises, doing the movements, right? The other hour and a half, and sometimes the whole 2 hours, would be in this state of emptiness, in this seated meditation on hard wooden stools, an upright back. When I was there, Beijing was very, very, very hot. The times I've been there, always been hot, always seem to be going towards the middle of the year, which is never my favorite time. the pollution's heavier, etc. Right? Not important, but and over time you build what they call a Qigong seat. Sitting on a hard wooden stool or a hard wooden chair initially can be quite uncomfortable after a short period of time, right? So you end up with a numb bum, as they say. But over time, what happens is you build this Qigong seat, as they talk about, which is not actually you losing your nerves and blood supply and your body becoming numb just from the trauma. It's actually that you don't become traumatized by it. You don't build calluses. You don't become numb. There's no nerve damage. And over time, actually, what you're building is this Qi seat, as they call it. Now, that seems so unscientific. It doesn't really matter. But Qigong never has aimed, in its 5,000 years of history, to try and fit into a modern Western scientific model. It doesn't want to fit into E equals MC squared and all these sort of parameters or be judged by it. And some of the most infamous or famous, actually, Qigong teachers have, especially one of them, and there's been a couple, have put themselves under the microscope of scientists in the physics laboratories in Beijing and America to have their abilities tested and have succeeded. Certainly one teacher has, which challenged the very laws of physics, right? That's probably another subject altogether. So Qigong, what I'm saying is, hasn't waited around for science to give it validity. It's got a 5,000 year history, right? It'd be waiting a long time, right? Would have given up long ago. And the fact that it still exists after all that time, and seems to have a very, very large following, is probably some testimony to its efficacy. It's no guarantee, because, I mean, we will talk about belief another time and about people being attached to ideas and the danger in that in many ways too. So there's no guarantee that something's been around 5,000 years that it's effective. But what we know through people that practice it, and certainly you can only give first-hand accounts, or you can work with, give accounts from people that you've worked with in a clinical sense, or in a class sense, or from your personal experiences, which becomes anecdotal. It's not peer-reviewed and tested through the scientific fraternity. And at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter if you feel that over time you're getting benefit from it. And certainly if you're causing no harm to anybody else, and there's no harm being caused to yourself, and you get benefit and you feel the benefit in your system. And I have many people that have gained benefit from doing this, and some of them very close to me. And for example, a very, very close friend, or more than a close friend, has used to have a lot of back problems, and just doing one class a week would keep all of those back problems away, because of, in Qigong and in Chinese medical theory, the lower back and the waist and the hips and this sort of area of the body is governed by the Qi, the energy of the kidneys. And so when you're strengthening that area, you're also strengthening the whole of the belt channel, the whole of the area of that area of the lower back and the waist and the hips. And so anyway, that's another whole discussion again, I guess. So this one really is to talk about a little bit of meditation and awareness, because I alluded to meditation, and talk about, from a Qigong point of view, what is meditation as well. And meditation and awareness in Qigong are linked, absolutely linked together. So having an active meditation, for example, where it's guided, where you're visualizing this, that, and the other, you're walking along, you find a nice peaceful spot on top of a mountain, and you have some spirit guide come to you, or some teacher appears. What does it look like? It's personal to you. That's some form of meditation. People like to do that sort of thing as well. But your brain is active through the whole time. You're using your imagination, you're using your thinking, you're regurgitating memory, and you're conjuring up all sorts of images. So there's no stillness in that. There's no actual reprieve, if you like, for the brain to be able to relax and rejuvenate. And in Qigong science, the idea really is about rejuvenation, is pulling back, if you like, the system from the brink of falling over the cliff, or for the brink of illness, and then building foundations as a preventative tool rather than as a healing tool for things that have gone wrong. And initially, a lot of the time, the healing is for things that have gone wrong, and we're trying to pull the body back into some areas of wellness, of course, and then build sustainability in a preventative way to be able to keep at bay most of the things that prevent illness. Right? There's no guarantee that you would do that. But there's enough anecdotal evidence, and enough people around the world have said how much their lives have changed by having some preventative practice like this. Right? And I'm one of those people. I'll give you my history another time, right? All the where I came from as a young child and where I am now at 66 years of age, right? And how well I'm doing actually, considering what I went through as a young kid in so many ways. So what we're really wanting to do from a Qigong point of view is to be able to have a state of stillness. Now, that stillness may also be in movement. You know, and Tai Chi in many ways in Qigong has been called this sort of meditation through movement. So just because you're moving doesn't mean you can't be still. Obviously, if you're not physically still, that's not what I'm talking about. You can be mentally still. And we want to have, in many ways, a heart and mind that is still. Both of those are linked together in this. I think in modern times, certainly here, it's 2021 now, and it's in July 2021 that I'm doing this. We're right in stage 5, not stage 5, the 5th lockdown in Melbourne, right? And there's a lockdown all over Australia. New South Wales is suffering, a lot of people are suffering, and there's a lot with that that's going on, right? So what we're aiming to do is to be able to have, how can we have some state of peace through this? Now, I have to watch myself. At the moment, I'm on my own here. I'm running my side of my aspects to the business here. Has nothing to do with teaching. It's to do really with getting orders out the door and other aspects of an online business right now. And that's paying the bills and keeping the wolves away from the door, and that's great. But because of the lockdown and because of COVID-19, I haven't been able to teach in person. There's been no people coming to classes, and if I had to rely upon that, that wouldn't be very good at all, right? It wouldn't work. So, you know, that's what's going on. But what the point I'm making in this is that there's a lot of mental strain and worries for people, which are real, very real. I mean, their income, their family dynamics, their own mental well-being, and whether they'll have a job or whether there's any sort of confidence in the retail or business community, whether their jobs will exist, whether they'll be able to pay their mortgages, etc., their bills. So there's very real stress. And I've found for myself, because I'm completely isolated from physical contact right now. I know a lot of people are in lockdown, but they're with their family, and that may be good or bad too, right? Because you're stuck with all these people, sometimes in a very small space. But at least you have some contact. You can have physical contact, you can have a hug, you can have a kind word, a smile, someone can make you a cup of tea or something like that. But being on your own is good when you choose to do that. And when I use the word choose, I mean that you have the option where you can say, okay, I'll just go for a bit of a wander and get a bit of headspace, a bit of heart space, and wander down the paddock or go for a walk down by the river. And that's good when you need to rejuvenate. But when you're forced into being on your own through legislation or through, you know, a lockdown because of the virus spreading, etc., and you don't have a say in it, well then all of those, you know, those luxuries of being on your own suddenly go away very quickly. You know, there's only so many things you can do. And I have multi-interests. You know, I've always been interested in my health because that was a mandatory thing when I was young. And out of that's grown, you know, all the teachings and insights I've had and this Qigong state of mind and being. But also I have many other interests. I mean, for the longest time, you know, I was a musician. And I keep my hand in every day now because I'm not so much a spring chicken, but it's what I want to do. I actually am improving as a player, and I want to do that, right? But also as a songwriter, and my passions of photography and riding a motorbike and hiking and being in nature. So, you know, about being involved in life. Now, when you're in lockdown, there's only so much guitar you can play. There's only so many photos you can take. There's only so many of these luxuries that were afforded to you before that become of interest. And after that, you're on your own.